All right, I just wanted to introduce to you our speaker, and Dee prepared this lovely biography that I am going to read, and I'm going to read the first sentence as it is prepared, and the only reason I'm going to read it as it is prepared is because you look amazing. So, Dee Carnahan was born in Putnam, Connecticut on September 27th, 1946. My goodness, you are beautiful. I am going to read that because you deserve for me to read that.
Hair color and makeup.
Dee is the fourth of 7 children of Paul and Georgette Kader. She is a 1964 graduate of Putnam High School. After graduation, Dee moved to Hartford, Connecticut and worked as a key punch operator at Aetna Insurance Company for over a year, returning to Putnam in 1965. She began working as the secretary receptionist at the former Cargill Trust Bank in Putnam, which became Hartford National Bank in 1966, moving to their new facility in the Putnam Shopping Center. After 5 years at the bank, Dee took the civil services test in 1969 and moved to the Washington, D.C. area to work for the federal government. She began her career of over 32 years in the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, for the Department of the Navy as a secretary, a GS-5, which you can elaborate on January 19, 1970, and retired on April 26, 2002, from the office of the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, a 4-star admiral, as protocol officer and scheduler, which is a GS-12. Upon retirement from the Pentagon, Dee went to work for one of her former vice chiefs, who became president and CEO of LMI, a not-for-profit company in Northern Virginia. Her position was executive assistant to one of the 3 vice presidents for almost 5 years, retiring at the age of 60 on September 30th, 2006. She and her husband, Rick Carnahan, moved to Woodstock, Connecticut in October of 2006, where they still reside and where we are very lucky to have you as a member of our community. So without further ado, Ms. Dee Carnahan.
Thanks, everybody. I think I know pretty much everybody here. And I brought my water this time because the first time I did these remarks was at the Putnam Middle School auditorium. And I was so dry and so sweaty. Not because I was nervous, I have to say. It was not nerves. It was because it was humid and they didn't have the AC cranked up, which was too bad because that would have helped a whole lot. But anyway, first of all, thank you all for letting me be here today to invade your Rotary meeting, which is kind of a fun thing to do if it comes with a lunch like this every time. That is very good. And I think I know pretty much everyone here now over the last 12 years that I've lived in this area again. Today, of course, we know is a very somber day. And the weather reflects that also today. It wasn't like that on the actual date of September 11th, 2001. It was, like we all probably knew, a most gorgeous day. And it was just a typical day to go to work for me. And people would say to me, "Oh my gosh, you work in the Pentagon." And they say, "What's it like?" I said, "It's a big old building that everybody just goes to their desk and does their thing." And that's pretty much what it is. When I first got there in 1970, I did not know anybody. I knew nobody. I went with my Mustang, which was falling apart, and my clothes in the back seat, and my $600 that I had to my name, and I had a job. So I left on a Saturday morning, and I think my parents were happy because they still had 2 kids at home, and I was still living with them. So they were going, "Bye, See you later. And so anyway, I had the job, so that was the important thing. And I found a place to stay for a week. And then I started to meet people at the Pentagon, girls my age that were working and were married. One of them was, her husband was in the Navy, so he was out for a 6-month deployment. And she said, I really would like to have a roommate while he's gone. She said, you want to move in with me? And I was, oh, heck yes. So I did. I moved in with her, and it worked out perfectly. We worked across the hall from each other for the Navy. And I picked the Navy because I liked the men in uniform. And I thought the Navy uniform was pretty hot. And I still do. But my husband was in the Navy when I met him. And but my brothers were all Air Force, and so that's a big bone of contention in their house. But anyway, I still like the Air Force too. But anyway, I went to my job that very first day, and because I had worked previously at the bank, and I was given a GS5 job with the hope of getting a GS6 in a year, which was fine, and I did that, and I stayed in there a couple of years, and actually, one of the admirals that I worked for was Jim Morrison's dad of the Doors, and they were estranged at that time. Yeah, slightly estranged, and of course, he was such a nice man, the admiral was. And but you never could bring that up with him. But he needed his secretary was senior to me at that point. And because I took stenography and she was on vacation, he said I need a stenographer because they were dictating in those days. And so they came down to my office and said, Dee, the admiral would like you to work for him for this week. And I went, oh, you're kidding me, because I was like a wreck. I went down there and he said, I gotta dictate some letters to you, Dee. And I said, okay, sir. So I'm sitting in a chair and he's got his shoes off, draped over the big leather chair in his office, and he's just talking away, and I'm taking all the shorthand. And obviously I did a good job, because every time she wasn't there, he'd call for me to go down. But anyway, so I kind of started out, down in the bottoms of the ranks, and actually the very first office I was in 1970 was where the plane hit in 2001. And it was kind of I was down in that area for maybe 5 years. And so I was saying to myself, Dee, if you had stayed in there, and also too, we were moving down to the new wedge, which was where the plane hit. And so it was a big surprise, trust me. I was in the office that day making Christmas plans for my boss, because the four stars that ran the services, they never wanted to have a Christmas party on the same night as the other one, because they basically invited the same people to their parties. And so I was on the phone, it was a beautiful day, and I was in temporary spaces on the 4th floor, E-ring, 6th quarter. And our new office was going to be right in the new wedge that got hit. So some of the Navy people, their spaces were finished first, and the vice chief and the CNO both had to wait. Theirs were still being worked on. And they were shoring everything up to make it so much safer for everybody, because we had windows that would have come in on you, and up in the old section. Everything was back to 1940, whatever, 6 to whatever it was. Anyway, so we were gonna be moving in November. And I always say to people, had it been November 11th instead of September 11th, they'd have killed a lot more people in that area, because it would have been filled with people where we were that would have been moved down the hallway. And you see why I need a podium. You know, I'm a Frenchman, I talk with my hands, so sorry about that. Anyway, so the day, it was a wonderful day. I got a great parking place in the south parking lot where the plane did come in. And I was sitting at my desk making phone calls, and then the TV was on, and we always had a TV in the office on mute. And they were showing the World Trade Centers. And it was sort of like, but we couldn't hear what they were saying. So the commander says to me, I think the plane hit the World Trade Center. And that was like around just about 9 or a little bit before 9. And I said, oh, it must have been an accident. And then, you know, I wasn't thinking anything else because it was nothing that would have ever entered my mind in 32 years I had been in that building. And so, anyway, he says, no, this is happening now. And then the other plane came in, and then it was like chaos in my office. Everybody got up, and the guys went into war mode. They were all military, so they went right to war mode, and it became a very serious place to be. I said to the captain, who was the exec for the 4-star, I said to him, what is happening? He says, well, it's terrorism. And I had no clue, seriously, what terrorism meant. And he said, we've been attacked by a foreign enemy. And I went, like, who hates us that much, you know? And so anyway, it became very, very serious in the office. Everybody was trying to do their jobs and my boss was not in the office. He was down the hall with the chief of naval operations in a meeting where they had been told about it. So they stopped what they were doing and started discussing what was going on. And so I asked the captain, I said, Captain, could this ever happen to us? And he said, no, it won't happen here. And within 10 minutes of that statement, the plane hit our building. And I'm gonna tell you, I was 100 yards away from where the plane came in, and the noise that plane made was incredible. And I thought, seriously, that we were being bombed. And I didn't know that it was a plane until the captain said, no, we just got hit by a plane. Get out of this building now. So we had to get out, because where we were located in temporary spaces, it was, like I said, where the plane came, it was like 100 yards away. So the smoke was traveling down the hallway towards our office. And we were all in the hallway at that point. Everybody came out of their spaces to go, what in God's name just happened here? And then I thought of all the friends that I had just moved into their spaces in the new wedge, which was very scary for me, because everybody was so excited about getting new spaces and having the newest of everything. And so when we found out, they said, okay, get out, you gotta go. So we did not even know how to get out of the building. That's the sad part. We had drills before, which we ignored, which it's sad to say, we did not pay a bit of attention to those little things going, evacuate. We just kept working. Knew it was just a test. Never dreaming in a million years that it would be something real. So we got to one point, we had one of the Pentagon cops there trying to help us to get out of the building. And as soon as we'd go down one stairwell, you could tell the smoke was coming down there too, because the plane brought the 5th floor all the way down to the ground. So it just went, and you've seen it in pictures, but I saw it in person, and it was very ugly. And so anyway, I said, so we ended up going over the concourse where the stores were and the banks and all that, where we could shop. And so people were still working, because they were far enough from the sound, they didn't know anything had happened at this point. So they're watching a crowd of people from every floor basically go out, you know, come running across the concourse to go out of the building. And they said, they were looking like, what are these people, crazy or what, you know? And it was because we had been hit, but they did not know they had not heard it. So anyway, we went out, and then of course, as soon as we got out in the back of the Pentagon, it was, we were told another plane was on its way, and we had to keep going as far as we could go. So that was where the one that went to Shanksville happened. And for them, I give them all the credit for saving a lot of lives, but giving up their own. And it was a heroic thing. I don't know if I could have done it myself had I been there. But anyway, I finally decided, and I had the wherewithal to take my purse with me because my life is in there. And so I took it, and I was in my heels and a dress, and I said, gosh, I gotta let Rick know that I'm okay, you know? So I go and I start walking all the way around on a road, and it was like about a mile to go around that side of the building to get to the other side. Now here I'm thinking I probably lost most of my friends who were just moved in there. And when I saw some of them standing out on the sidewalk in front of the mall, the Pentagon City Mall, I started to cry, and they were crying, and it was like they thought I was dead, I thought they were dead. It was just a reaction that we were all so happy to see each other. And and my phone, of course, was in my car, which is the side of the building that got hit, so I couldn't get to it for a couple days, and so I had to go to find a phone that worked. Everything was so jammed by this time because we were so unprepared, and I mean that in every ounce of the word, because we did not ever expect anything like this to happen to us, and it was just such a surprise and not a good one. But so anyway, they had to call ambulances and all this. And so anyway, long story short was I finally got to a phone to call my husband, and they had been evacuated in Crystal City because of they thought that if they hit the buildings, they may have planted bombs in the high-rise buildings where people worked in the garages, you know, so that they might try to kill a whole bunch of people that way. So anyway, they were all evacuated, but he was waiting to hear about me. And so I said to my friends, I said, I'm gonna start walking there. It was like probably about a mile maybe. But I did not know, I knew how to drive there, I just didn't know how to walk there because the buildings are, you know, tons of high rises all clumped together. So anyway, I finally had to stop people that were running on the sidewalks within the Crystal City area, and I said, I need to get to this building, and they said, oh, you bypassed it, you gotta go back that way and go up. So I was walking by myself, and the guy that answered the phone in Rick's office told him, you know, your wife is fine, she's on her way over here. So Rick went back downstairs, they were on the 9th floor. He came out and he sees me, and I see him, but I don't know who he is. I am so shook up, and he's going, Dee, like that, and I'm like, who is that man? And I go, Rick, and then I burst into tears because I said, I don't know, you know, I said, I know I've lost a lot of friends, and that was very true. A lot of colleagues and friends were killed that day that had just moved in from the area where we were still working. And they died basically at their conference table talking about New York, never thinking in a million years it would happen at the Pentagon. So we ended up staying at Rick's office until 4 o'clock because there was gridlock everywhere. They had closed all the streets, the roads going into DC, and only allowing people to go south. So we lived about 8 miles from the Pentagon on 395 South. So my car was, like I said, over at the Pentagon. I couldn't get it, and I knew I wouldn't get it for a couple days. But so we finally left, and we were able to get to our house fairly quickly at 4 o'clock. And when I got home, there were 27, I think, messages on my machine from all around the world, from people calling me to say, Dee, are you okay? Dee, are you okay? We're so worried about you. And these were people that were ranked from officers to friends and all over. And I was so, I mean, it kind of tugged at me because, you know, yeah, I was okay physically, but mentally I was thinking about everybody that didn't make it. And I didn't even know who did not make it. So that was the thing. So my guys called me later that night and said, Dee, we're not gonna be able to, you can't come in the rest of the week because we have no spaces. We're gonna be moved to another building outside of the Pentagon. And I said, okay, so they said, just take the 4 days off, or the 3 next days off, and then we'll get you a place to sit on Monday. So anyway, they called me over, well, they called me the next day and said, by the way, we know who's been killed, and we want you to know before you hear it on the news. And I was like, oh God, here we go. So they started naming people's names, and I was like, just tearing up, because these are young people, younger than me by a long shot, some young sailors, a young gal that was in a great job, had clearances off the charts. Just, she used to come in and see me every day because she'd have to bring my boss, they called it the black program, because you had to have a clearance that nobody else has. So I couldn't even touch those. So she'd come in and hand them to the captain, and he'd bring it into the vice chief, and then read it, sign it, whatever, put it back in the black bag, and she'd come and get it. I mean, it was highly classified stuff. So, and I wouldn't have understood it anyway. So, so anyway, I stayed home for the rest of the weekend, and then on Monday they had called me over the weekend. So we got spaces in the, oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm gonna cut this short because it's already 5, almost 5 of 1. Sorry about that. Anyway, so we had spaces, but we were all crammed together in a building that overlooked the Pentagon. And so you could see the building, it was just horrendous. And so we finally got back to the Pentagon, I would say about a couple months later. We had to stay there because we couldn't go back to our spaces, they were locked up. And the first day that I got my car in about 2 days, and the first time we went back to the Pentagon, Rick and I, he drove up, and there was this guard shack, and here was this 18-year-old with a gun over his shoulder and making, and no, I mean, you want to talk about serious? Oh my God. I said, I need to come and get my car, which is down that lane over there, and I had to show my IDs and my building pass and all of that. And the first day that I got back to the Pentagon to work, it was so different getting into that building. We would, in the beginning, when I first started there, you just walked in, hi, wave to the guards. They were not doing anything. And we always called them the Keystone Cops because, they were just kind of hanging around and didn't care who walked by them or anything. I'm gonna tell you, that went from nonchalant to, you better have some ID, and they dumped your bags and everything. So when we got back into the building, it had the smell of airplane fuel, and they had these huge, they were about that tall, about that big around on the corners of the corridors for air fresheners to suck up some of that smell because it's all you could smell. And we were put into a Marine 3-star's office. He was bunked somewhere else with his staff. But it was a tiny office, and we were like, I don't know. I was the only girl with about 10, 12 men, and it wasn't bad, but. I mean, I never minded, I don't know about them, but, you know. So one of the first days they opened up, once we hadn't been in that building, so we hadn't heard the sound of an airplane going over International Airport. And I'm gonna tell you, that shook up everybody in the office, the men and me. We were all going, what the heck is that? And it was a plane going over that part of the building, which we never had that. We used to see them go by our building, you know, on the side going into National. And we were shook. So anyway, then we stayed in that office, and I got an offer to go work for one of my 4 stars that took over a company in Northern Virginia, and I went there for 5 years. I didn't really want to retire from the Pentagon, but he said, look, Dee, it's not safe anymore, you know, come work for me, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, so I retired and had a big retirement, 400 and some people at my retirement in the Pentagon, and there were, from the Secretary of the Navy down to the lowest sailor in the Navy there, and my family was all there. I gave my very first speech, and everybody laughed through the whole thing. So it was funny, because I gave my little synopsis of my career. And it was, I have to say, but for 9/11, I really loved my job and the Pentagon. I was proud to be there. I did 32 years and 3 months in the building, and then because I hardly ever took any time off for sickness, I had another 9 months of sick leave added, so I got paid for 33 years. So I always say I worked basically 33 years in that building, and it was my honor to be there. So I hope I haven't talked too long. I'm sorry if I have, but I just, you know.
Thank you, Dee.
Thanks
Oh,
very much.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sure
it was
you
long
can
winded.
stay over as long as you like to ask, answer
Yeah, well, that's
questions
true.
or
If anybody,
anything.
I don't know if is that okay, Kathy? Or you got another
Well,
meeting?
after we adjourn, you can stay here.
Oh, okay. If anybody
and,
wants to
ask
ask any
questions
questions, I'm
and
happy
so
to
forth.
answer them. I'm doing another speech tonight in Webster, Mass. for 9/11 to a group of Catholic women in St. Joseph's Church in Webster. And so I'm just gonna do like I did now, wing it.
Right.
I hope it made sense, because I was kind of going back and forth, but I think you got the
You
gist
were family.
anyway.
So, the connection, then what I want to mention is we all know that day was a Tuesday.
Yes, same day,
And,
yeah.
and just from a show of hands, how many Rotarians went to Rotary that day on 9/11? And quite a few. And we all remember how turbulent that day was
Yes.
for everyone. Certainly not what you went through,
Well,
your
I
comrades,
was
but
lucky.
But that's what Rotary meant in that day, on that day,
Yeah.
is where can you go to be consoled and to get some friendly faces,
Yeah,
some support.
yeah.
I know that Ron was there.
Oh, you was, yeah,
Ron was
well,
there that
yeah,
day. So that's what coming to a Rotary meeting meant
yeah,
on September 11th,
sure.
2001.
That's,
And that, I think, is what we need to share
Yeah.
with our fellow Rotarians.
yeah,
What a Rotary meeting means.
yeah, yeah.
So, Dean, we want to take a picture, have a gift card, so we want to do that by,
Glasses, come
where
on.
would you like that? Linda,
Go
where would
take
you
the
like
pictures
that?
with Dee and her glasses.
Flag? Okay.
Oh, okay, I'll put this on the table.